I'm Vicky. I live here in Bromley with my son Felix, who has cerebral palsy. Felix is almost 11, and I have another daughter Martha, who's 7, and my husband Guy. Felix has cerebral palsy with forelimb involvement. That is the official name that's given to him, which means he can't walk. He has very little speech. Felix was born 10 days past his due date. The cord was very tightly wrapped around his neck, so as he was being delivered, he was basically strangling himself and couldn't come out naturally because the cord was preventing him from being delivered. We trusted the midwives, we trusted the hospital who told us they knew what they were doing, but the monitor that was monitoring Felix's heart rate was telling the midwife it was bouncing from the top of the paper to the bottom, up and down the scale, and the midwife just kept saying, "Oh, the machine's faulty, it's fine, Felix is fine." And we now know that he was in great distress for about 4 hours. As Felix was born, she hit the crash button and the entire team arrived in the room, and that's at the point that we realised things obviously hadn't gone the way that they should have done. We spoke to a lawyer recommended by a work colleague of mine. And when I explained the case to him, he felt that it needed to be dealt with by a specialist firm, so he actually recommended Lee Day, which is how we got in touch with them in the first place. Olive Lewin, we first met her in November 2003 when Felix was 2. And at that time, she came for a home visit to explain the whole process to us and spent a lot of time with us, spent the afternoon with us, talking through all the various aspects. Immediately from the first point that we met Olive, we formed a relationship with her where we just felt she was very easy to talk to, very easy to relate to, talked in our language, completely understood our situation, talked in a sympathetic but not patronising way.
Felix is a beautiful little boy. What I wanted to achieve was a decent level of compensation to enable Felix to remain in his own home environment, to provide him with a decent care package, a 24-hour care package, which is what he requires, and also for him in the future, if necessary, to live on his own with his carers in appropriate accommodation. I do a lot of cerebral palsy cases. I tend to work with the same experts, and so I know them. I know how they think. I can ring somebody up, a case will come in, I'll say, look, these are the facts, haven't got the records, what do you think? What's your feel on this? And you can get a very good idea right at the very beginning.
Okay. Are you ready?
Initially, I instructed a midwife, an obstetrician, a neonatologist, a neurologist and a neuroradiologist. The neuroradiologist will look at MRI scans. And we all looked at the records, and there were very clear breaches of duty, of care. And there was also very clear evidence that the breaches of duty caused Felix's damage. I also instructed, in order to quantify the compensation side of things, a care expert, occupational therapist, physiotherapist, speech and language therapist, an accommodation expert, an expert in assistive technology. And each of those experts went to the home, saw Felix at home, and said, right, this is what Felix needs to provide for him not only now, but for the rest of his life.
We just kept thinking, this is about Felix. We have to do this for Felix. If it was negligence, it's important to prevent this happening to other people, but more importantly, to make sure that Felix is able to access the kind of care and the kind of equipment that he's going to need. We'd spent 2 years already within the NHS where it was blatantly obvious that it's a complete postcode lottery in terms of what equipment you receive, what type of care you get. At the point that we got the admission of liability, we were living in a 3-bedroom house, which was a normal sized family house if you didn't have a wheelchair, but we had a high step to the front door, we had a high step in the garden, and Olive helped us understand that as Felix grew and as he got bigger and heavier, we wouldn't be able to continue carrying him and lifting him, and that a house that was adapted would make our lives much easier.
I made an application for what is called an interim payment. And I asked for a very large sum of money so that we had enough money to go out and purchase appropriate accommodation, have all the adaptations made, and also to start putting in a care package.
We moved into the house and very quickly we saw a dramatic change in Felix and in Felix's attitude and in the rest of the family. We suddenly had slightly wider doorways, which don't seem as if it would make a huge amount of difference to your life, but all of a sudden when you can manoeuvre Felix around the whole house and the whole house is accessible to him, it makes a huge difference to family life. By the time we settled the court case about 5 years later, I think Olive was and still is a part of our family. She was there helping us along the way, emotionally supporting us through the various stages, encouraging us.
The way the claim was settled was we got a lump sum, a suitably large amount of money, and then annual payments for the rest of Felix's life to pay for his care and case management. You can't help but be personally involved. I mean, because you are with these people, you know, it really is, you know, for a long period of time. You do build up very, very close relationships with them, you know, and it is just a relief, and it's just a joy to see that, you know, some of their suffering is going to be relieved just by money, just by buying appropriate accommodation. And we were able to do that before the case was concluded.
Felix's settlement has made a huge difference. It's enabled us to independently decide ourselves what equipment Felix needs and can have. And one particular example of that is the smart powered wheelchair that he's got. Felix's ability and the fact that he's not dexterous enough to use an electric wheelchair meant that the state would never provide an electric wheelchair for him. Whereas we've been able to purchase him a wheelchair that runs on tracking in our own home, and for the first time Felix has been able to independently move himself from one room to another, which we never thought would happen. And Felix loves it, and we have a lift installed which enables us to transfer him up to his room. We've got a special bath that moves up and down so Felix can go in at the right position, a special toilet more for his friends to use. And then we've also bought a trike and various computers and speech and language equipment that enable Felix to use switches and interact on his computer with people using various switch programs. He's now very sociable, very bubbly, and he's even trying to talk, which we never thought he would do. And it's amazing, you know, people said the house would change our lives and we didn't believe them, but it really has. I'm much happier about the future for Felix because I know that financially he'll be able to have the carers that he needs, the equipment that he needs, the support that he needs. And so, you know, the future is a much better place for him. And we wouldn't have had that if we hadn't gone through this process and reached a settlement. In fact, it would be completely the opposite. The future would be a very scary place for him because he'd be, you know, particularly if something happens to us, he'd be stuck in care homes. And that would just be awful.